Fantastic. Welcome to this week's episode of Curious Faith, questions and conversations for those thinking about following Jesus. Again, we're super excited to continue these conversations. We had so much fun with our first one. We can't wait to just hear your feedback on the second one as well. I'm Bill Wallace. I'm the host for Curious Faith, and I'm going to invite my friends over now as we mask up. It is the land of COVID still, and both of my friends here have been outside of any of our bubbles here, so we'll do masks for this particular one, and that allows me a chance to show off my Supersonics mask, which I'm okay with.
Oh, Gary Payton.
There you go. Gary Payton, greatest point guard in the game of basketball. Again, I'm Bill Wallace. I'm a pastor here in the Pacific Northwest. Just absolutely love talking about Jesus. I love questions. And I also thought it would be fair this week to say that I love candy corn. All of you who disagree, well, leave your name in the comments, I guess. We'll try and get you out. I want to introduce you to my friend Keith. Keith, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep, Keith Gustafson, live in Linwood, Washington, and good friend of Bill. And
thanks so much. You got a Halloween candy that's your favorite?
Baked beans.
That's excellent.
I just bought a box. It took me back to a zoo in Duluth, Minnesota.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. All right. That's a throwback. That's really good. To my right is my friend Ryan. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm Ryan Brown. I am an executive director of a small nonprofit here in Snohomish County. I'm also a mission developer for a church up in Lakewood, Washington. We're converting a church into a student services center, and excited to be here and be in this conversation with you today. Favorite Halloween candy? Goodness, probably Snickers because it's classic, but also the 100 Grand just speaks to me. All that caramel.
Yeah.
What other people hate about the 100 Grand, I love that chewy, like take your time. Yeah,
I get you. My wife Sarah loves
go.
100 Grand as well. There you go.
delicious.
You guys can fight over them.
There we go. Yeah.
Next time. Very good.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us. For those of you that watched our last episode, you heard, Keith and I hadn't seen each other, and at least not live and in person, 8 months. Ryan, I think about the same. The last time we might have seen each other was over some barbecue.
Yeah, maybe a year ago.
Oh man,
Yeah,
really?
I think it was about a year ago.
That's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
been a while.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, this is really, really fun. Well, we're looking at questions of faith, and we're trying to look at those questions that I think are challenging for those of us, really at any stage of faith, whether you've been someone following Jesus your whole life, if you're new to that, if you're someone that followed Jesus and honestly have stopped at this point, but are thinking, I'm wondering if they're still there. And so today we actually wanted to look at a question that I think really has been at the heart of so many of churches and faith followers for a really long time. How do I love my neighbor? And it's something that, as we'll talk about, Jesus gets right from the very beginning. It's a key piece, I think, for all of us to try and figure out. But the ramifications of that, I think, have actually led to a lot of the challenges that we face. And so we thought we'd spend some time looking at that. And some cool perspectives from that as well. So pop quiz. Where does this come from in the Bible? Do either you know? Do you know? And the right answer, of course, is, well, Jesus.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah. The Sunday school answer, right?
I know, right? It's
the greatest commandment.
It is both the
Absolutely.
Sunday school answer, and in this case, it's actually true. I mean, There you go, for any that grew up. So Jesus gives this commandment. He gets asked the question, what's the greatest commandment? And he responds back with, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And he adds a second one. He adds the commandment in, love your neighbor as yourself. So he gets asked this first question, hey, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus responds, but he doesn't just give one. He gives this second one, love your neighbor as yourself. So clearly, again, that Jesus elevates that into this question. One is fascinating in and of itself. But two, then, all right, we're talking about something big here. We're talking about something serious. What does that mean? How are we supposed to love our neighbor?
I think that the challenge of the question actually comes from the opposite of that, which tends to be how do I powerfully disagree with people. I think because I think our tendency, and I think this is an Americanized culture thing, but I think our tendency, especially politically right now, is to look at how I disagree with you and find ways to not necessarily to find common ground, but figure out like, okay, how are we going to differ? Rather than to look for things that we may come to a common place on. So in fact, I was in a conversation the other day with a friend who asked, hey, did you see that sign? How comfortable do you feel eating at that restaurant with that sign in the window? Like naming, if their politics don't line up, do you feel comfortable patronizing that business? And I think that, to me, that communicates a lot about what's going on in the question here, right? Is what lens are we looking through, and for what reasons?
Yeah. I think that's great. Of course, the historical context of where Jesus asked this is interesting and is fascinating, but that is the challenge of the church. You always have to look at it in your time. And let's not deny our time is as nasty, as divided. Most of us, I think, are becoming more and more defined by what we are against than what we're for.
Truly.
Whether we'd like to think that or not, I think there's a lot of truth to that. How could we be known as people that are for loving our neighbor? Would that work? Or is that just our culture kind of spitting into the wind right now,
I think for me, it's first of all, how do I know my neighbor? Just how do I get involved in people's lives and engaged and develop some kind of relationship, friendship that keeps on going. Isn't just a one meet and greet and it's done, but being involved in people's lives. That's my bigger challenge.
That's really good. Actually, can we go down that trail a little bit? I'm curious about both of you. My kids would say that we've moved too much. But the cool thing about how we have moved is that I end up in neighborhoods with people different than me. And that's not always true. For me, particularly in my job, being a pastor, I generally spend most of my working time around other Christians. Weird, I know. Often Christians who think a lot like me because I'm their boss, like there's a lot of that. There's something about being in relationship with neighbors because I'm in their world all of a sudden. Has that been your experience as well? Well, I mean, you lived, of course, in Africa for a long time too. I don't know about
But I had an official role there, so that
sure.
And I was a white missionary, so that was an identity. When I look at my wife Florence, I see her just getting to know people and people. She worked with hospice here in Everett for over 10 years, and just got to know people well. Would listen to their stories, and she was loved, and she loved people. And for her, it was a much more natural kind of thing. For me, I need a reason to be involved in people's lives. Almost.
No. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah. How about you?
I don't know. I find that, I'm a natural extrovert. I mentioned that earlier. And so I can hit it off with just about anybody and have quality conversations. A barista, somebody working at the grocery store. It doesn't really matter where I am. I find a way into that relationship. And I think that the piece that's so challenging and important to me is that it's in relationship that we affect change. And I think Andy Stanley said this, you can choose to make a point or you can choose to make a difference. And ultimately, if all I'm doing is trying to stand for a value and change your mind and make a point, then there's likely very little relationship in that. But making a difference, and that's what you're talking about with your wife, like, you're on hospice and you're going to die. That's making a point, and it's awful. But walking alongside a person and coming alongside in those dark moments and bringing hope in those places, that's change making and it's difference making in people's lives. And I think we carry that. It's how we live in our neighborhoods. And you could be the pastor here 10 hours a day and go home and go isolation and never see your neighbors and you communicate something to them about how you value people in a way that your congregation may never see because they don't actually spend that time in your backyard. And we can live in dual worlds like that, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy.
No,
And it's not good for people.
I'd agree, and actually, I think that's happening more and more.
Yeah.
You know, there's the whole neighborhood idea. We used to keep we used to have no fences, whatsoever, and then we started putting up fences for the animals.
Yeah, and people used to sit on their front porch at night and look each other in the eye. Yeah, absolutely.
And most of us has lost that now, right?
Yeah.
Most of us sit on the back deck.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on garage door openers. Honestly, like that has totally transformed neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Who parks in the garage?
Well, there's that now too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff, and I would love to go back to Florence in particular, because you're right. Like, if she's known for that job within her neighborhood, is that a net positive, net negative? Again, speaking as a pastor, you're absolutely right. With each neighborhood that I go into, that's always immediately one of the things that people wonder about. Oh, wait, pastor's in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Do we have to change? How do we do? And so I try to work really, really hard in order to, just be a positive person within that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Is that something that Florence?
She did have her identity as a nurse, a hospice nurse. But I was thinking more of just the relationships with people at work. That she just got to know people well, and would ask stories and take time to listen to them. And that's a gift that she has, and she shared it well, and she was loved for that.
Yeah.
And she loved people for that.
Yeah.
Good. I think all that gets to a level of time that if we're going to start to try and answer this question, how do I love my neighbor? At some level, you have to be willing to invest some time into that, or it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and not just that language. I like that language, but I also don't like that language. like I can invest in you and do nothing, right? Like I can say I'm going to give you. I'm going to intentionally give an hour a week to being, the eye contact, how are you, neighbor guy, and never actually do anything for you. So the investment, I think, is not just to what I intend for you to have from me, but also what I intend to try and how I try and build reciprocal relationship with you. And I don't know, this is true for me, it's probably true for you. I'm sure true for y'all too. There are people in my neighborhood that I see all the time and I have no idea who they are, but we wave at each other and that feels like enough interaction, but it's not actually quality or healthy. We had a couple in our neighborhood that recently passed away. It was a traumatic incident. They were older, and the assumption in the neighborhood is that a part of the trauma of that for them was that nobody knew who they were in the area. That they were just kind of isolated in the isolation. And I carry that around. I mean, I don't necessarily feel personal guilt, but it's like, man, that's a hard thing to feel. And so I've tried to be more intentional about how I engage people, and it's not just about driving up and giving the little "Hey, how are you?" wave, but taking the time to roll down a window and how you guys doing, and how are things with the family, those kinds of relationships. Because again, what we would consider a minimal time investment really can even be more than minimal. It can just be shallow. Yeah. So. Yeah.
To jump on that, you said that really well, isolation within the isolation. Again, not only are we living in a time where I think we're more fractured and we're seeing more divisions, obviously, we're wearing masks right now. We're in this time of COVID. How are we supposed to be able to love our neighbor, build in them, build relationship, do all of that? How are we supposed to model that when, we're supposed to stay 6 feet apart from each other? We're supposed to stay within our own bubble.
Yeah.
How's that work?
There's a cultural part of it too. I thought of two things this afternoon. One was a Dutch couple we knew, Kees and Rianka, who they said, you Americans, you make friends with lots of people. You call lots of people friends. But once you're not with them, you don't have any contact with them. He said, we as Dutch people, we have very few friends compared to you. but we are very close, and we know them well, and they know us.
Mm.
Are you going to remember us when we're not together?
Oh, wow.
The other thing is, in Congo, we had a neighbor who died here, and we didn't know about it for 2 weeks. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
We weren't there when the ambulance came, and
Mm-hmm.
didn't hear about it. I told some friends in Congo, and they said, "How could that be? That would never happen here."
Mm-hmm.
Because we are a community. We know our neighbors. The word spreads. We know that we need to care for someone. We need to go and mourn with them. We need to sit with them.
Yeah.
How is it in your culture that you wouldn't know that?
Yep.
And it really struck me
Yeah.
that we have very compartmentalized lives here.
Man. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I know that that's true and has been for decades, right? That's
Yeah.
that's not a new problem.
No.
But I think the new problems, the things that we deal with COVID, the isolation that we're creating because schools are closing and because jobs are work's closing, whatever else. It's not just about the like, hey, Bill, it's good to see you. But it's also the, hey, Bill, how are you doing? Like, what's going on in your world and your family? Like that meaningful check-in, those are things that we haven't done well for decades either. And when you don't know how to do one, and then you lose the other,
Yeah.
I mean, we just fall apart.
Yeah.
Whereas if, like I would imagine in those cultures, when we get to a place where this becomes the thing, where isolation has to happen, there's a deep need for that extra relationship piece, that meaningful, that deep stuff, that I think you probably just figure it out. It's like, I will figure out how to get that connection from you because it is so important to me. And I don't have to be in front of you to get that. But we just lose both.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we lose one, we lose both. So.
Yeah, boy. The more that I think about this and where we are, again, I think we've seen this around us. I think you're right. This has been an issue within our society for a while, been exacerbated so much, in the last 8 to 9 months. The question is more pressing than ever.
Truly.
Man, like anybody who's watching this, anybody who's listening to this, I'm sure over the last 8 to 9 months has desperately needed someone to be their neighbor. And again, to go back to that Jesus element, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Not just, say hi, not just wave, but someone has needed a neighbor to share some type of love with them.
Yeah.
How on earth could those of us who consider ourselves Jesus followers, how are we supposed to live that out? How do we model that? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's no simple answer to that question, and I think that it's very multifaceted,
So
right?
Disappointing. You're never going to sell a book
I know,
if that.
I
Come
know,
on.
you can't sell a book. Well, maybe you could, like a big book.
A
It'd be
really
a big book.
really thick book.
Yeah, maybe we could start a podcast with
There we
it.
go.
There we go. But I think, conceptually, you start with simple things, right? Like how I spend my money and how I invest in my community is one way that I show care. And I think about that all the time now. In fact, Ellie and I, my wife and I, have been talking about Christmas gifts and what that's going to look like for this year. And it's like, it would be easy to jump on Amazon and just build a list, get it sent, done deal, right? But there are Etsy shops all over the countryside where individuals are building things, and we could be pouring that money into individuals and into communities that could be using it in that way. And so we're really trying to think about what our financial investment is into our neighbors. This is a bit of a shout out, but we have a neighbor down the road. She's an artist. She paints and she does pictures and things. She takes pictures and things. And in spring, we had her come to the house and paint the windows, the front window on the house. So we had a mural on the front of the house that she painted. And then this fall, we had her come over and take it down and she put birch trees and leaves and a scarecrow on the window.
Gosh, that's
and it was just a fun way to like throw her some scratch and be able to like partake and get, have some art put up, whatever. It would have been easy to go buy some stupid jelly things from the dollar store, but that's not the same. It's not making investment into a neighbor, So.
Yeah. Well, and that gets a little bit, from a community standpoint. I I know the little time I spent in Mexico, we lived there about a year and a half. Yeah, it was exactly that. You couldn't go to Amazon. Yeah, didn't necessarily have it at a store, but there was someone in the community. There was someone in that nearby village. There was someone there that, you could build a connection with, made a difference. Supported a business, all those things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, part of loving our neighbor right now, again, within all this is that, right? It's supporting the local business. It's wearing the mask around people that, are outside of your bubble, like all those things like that. But let's be real, like that, those have become points of tension.
Yeah.
I mean, those have become points of argument. We argue about that. I'm trying to love my neighbor by wearing my mask around you, but you are in my face about that. You see it as way more loving as actually allowing you the freedom of not being able to do that and so on and so forth. Can we step into those things? Can we somehow speak into those conversations? The answer could be no. I mean,
Yes, and I think the bold question there is why, and I think it will always will be, especially as we get further into this political divide. Why do we stand where we stand on those things? And I don't know about you two. We're pretty clear about where our mask situation is going to be and why as a family. Partly because we're protecting our family and the things that we value in that way. But I also recognize that I work with 80-year-olds on a regular basis, and if I want to keep them healthy and ensure that their families get to be around them for a longer period of time, I have to take responsibility for that in my life. I'm clear about my why, and the struggle, I think, in what you're asking is, it's easy for me to go, you don't want to wear a mask? Why? Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, help me understand why. Mm-hmm. It's that point making versus difference making. Mm-hmm. It becomes a point of challenge instead of a point of change. So
that's nice.
It's awfully brutal.
Yeah.
And that's true in a lot of different areas, but especially around this kind of stuff. And it makes me think, we're here to talk about church and talk about the Christian version of this in certain ways. I wonder what this is an actual question for you, Mr. Moderator. What does it look like for us to be a church that engages that conversation and to take a tangible stance on issues like this and others? Mm-hmm. And what has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's been really, really hard. Quite honestly, it's been fascinating for me to talk with fellow pastors, particularly. I'm in a group called the Jesus Collective, which I think is just a ton of fun, and it's so there are pastors that I connected with now in Canada and the UK, and then all throughout the United States, and it is fascinating how regionally that question gets answered differently now too. I've got a friend who's in the Midwest area and has a church for whom, they are so frustrated by masks that again, for them, loving the neighbor is clearly just ripping all the masks off and being done. And he doesn't feel that way and is trying to lead into that as well. And it's so challenging. I continue to hear of pastors that are, near losing their jobs over these types of things. I've been pretty fortunate here. For those of you that maybe don't know our story, I'm the founding pastor of Hope. And there's a lot of really, really cool things about that. One of the cool things about that is that, I'll be honest, many people here at Hope have an understanding of me and my ministry and what's important to me. The negative of that is that many people here have an understanding of me and ministry, what's important to me. So in terms of, they've heard me before say, I think one of the best things we can do in our community, and we emphasize a lot, local community, is to be kind, caring, loving, compassionate here in our particular area. But I don't know that I've gotten a lot of pushback on that just because of the unique nature of what we've been able to create here. Yeah. I know that's not true. It wouldn't be true for me at several of my previous congregations. Yeah.
I think challenges to that for me that I've experienced, and maybe you two have as well, is there are certain pastors that I've been around that say our congregation will do the mask thing so that we don't end up on the news as a congregation that spread COVID, which to me is not a strong value for people. Like, it just says, I just don't want to be on King 5.
Right.
If that's your reason why, that feels pretty shallow, right? It doesn't feel like it's about
It's not
care.
missional
It's
at
not care
all.
for
It's
other.
not
It doesn't feel
loving.
missional. Yeah. And then I've been around others that are in full-on lockdown and who have spent very little time investing in their congregation, even from a distance. It's just like, it's simple. I'm going to throw a quick sermon on a quick thing and be done. And that doesn't feel missional either. It just feels like a full cop-out. It's like, there's definitely a middle ground there.
Yeah.
But I don't know that anybody's figured it out fully.
Yeah.
You know?
That's,
But
Yeah.
fortunately, we're a body. I mean,
Yeah.
we're many.
Truly.
And I'm just thinking about people I know in our church. So for me, I've gotten engaged in Zoom. I've sort of figured out Zoom right away, and I've set up a lot of meetings at our church. There's some people that...
you're the Zoom guru at your church, if I remember
some
correctly.
people say that.
Yeah? Nice.
But for
Royalties paid, too.
I know. Own that, man. You got to own that.
For some people, they say, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We don't like it at all.
Yeah.
We don't connect with people. We're not engaged.
Yep.
But then I hear their names that Dave came and helped me.
Yeah.
He put up a walkway to my house.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that never figured out Zoom, but he's engaged in people's lives. He's doing what he does.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he wears a mask or not.
Yeah.
And that's not important to me. He's figured out a way to be a part of the church. And there's a Bible study that I don't lead, but I'm a part of on a Monday night. There's probably 40 people that get a reminder about that, and 6 to 10 who come
Yeah.
on Zoom.
Yeah.
And keep reminding people, call people who aren't here. Because I don't know why they're not here, but they don't need to be here in order for us to be a part of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wear a mask, and so I guess maybe I make that an issue by wearing it. But if someone doesn't have a mask, I mean, last time we met, you didn't, and so I said, I don't think I'll do this again if you don't wear a mask. But on a casual basis, I don't know that I would say anything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that to be okay, you do it my way or we're done. Even though I did that to you.
No, that was totally understandable. All circumstances around. Yeah, man, it's just a challenging time.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think so. One thing that's coming to mind for me, and we've been super proactive in our congregation to say that that we're not going to open it for worship. That our version of open will be outside or it will be virtual, but we're not going to do indoor worship experiences for that particular body. And but we've also said that in the event that there's a need in our building for young people, for families, that is a priority to us, and that we'll make accommodations in order to serve that population. And for me, that's a big part of living into this kind of great commandment, is to say that we will make sacrifices in our body for the sake of people who are outside of that body to experience whatever need they have, right? So we did food services. We're building a shower and a laundry for folks that are homeless or in the foster care system. We're opening the place up for internet access so people can come and use it. And I think, and none of that's for us. But again, that we're living into a value that says that this building is meant for more than just what we would use it for. And again, that comes back to that question of why do we do what we do? Why will you stay open, or why will you stay closed, or why will you push the envelope and have a full building full of people, or not, or whatever? It's it's really a values conversation.
Yeah, when you put it like that, I do like that. What are your personal values, and then how does that play out?
Yeah.
And then to circle it back around again to that. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, how do I love my neighbor if that's not driven by my values, or if my values are selfish or internal, then that's going to be seen. That's how it's going to be known. For those of us who consider ourselves Jesus followers, for those that are thinking about that, then we have to have that different conversation. Like we love our neighbor because Jesus. Again, we don't like to use this the word, funnily enough, in the Christian church, commands us to do it. But that's it. It is, back to the Sunday school answer, it is the greatest commandment. That's it. Boom, right there. Love God, love your neighbor. Yeah. It wasn't a suggestion. It was definitely a commandment. Yeah. That should be a driving value for us. Yeah.
It's a driving value for lots of people, whether they're Jesus followers or not.
Truly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an important community value.
No, yeah.
I mean, we flip it and call it the golden rule culturally, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing. That's where it came from, was the great commandment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That gets to something else we're going to talk in another podcast here at some point, actually, which I really do find fascinating. So, if you're right, and to be clear, I think you are, that's a high value for everyone, then how do we as Jesus followers, how are we different in any way?
I don't know that we have to be
No, have
different.
to be.
No. I would say, I doubt that someone will say, he must be a Christian. No, I don't think he's a friend, or he's a good person, or he's someone I want to know. And from that, relationship builds, and if you're a Jesus follower, then faith becomes a part of it. But it's not my identity as being good as a neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And my faith is a part of that. Mm-hmm. But there's lots of people who are good as neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think what could set us apart, I don't think it does all the time. In fact, the majority of the time I don't think it does. But I think what could set us apart is that there's a holistic nature that we could live into of physical, spiritual, emotional, not just wellness, but like practice, where it's not just that I meet a need of yours, where I'm like, I'm a good neighbor, so I loan you a cup of milk, but where there's an element of prayer and uplifting and like emotional, spiritual support that exists in that as well, where the relationship is more rounded. That's where we could be different. I mean, I think about the first century church when I think about that. They committed themselves to prayer and fasting and being together and doing that thing. And what we've done is we've gone cruise ship on it, and we hang out on Sunday mornings, and we have a potluck, and then we go home, and we forget all of the stuff, and we don't do that with the people that live right next door to us. And sometimes never, and maybe never would or never will, So again, I say we could be those people, but we definitely are less than we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get you on that.
Yeah.
To answer my own question, I think both of you actually are really right, really spot on. For me, the piece I would put on with that would be for Jesus followers to be leaders in that and not just followers of that. Like that would be one of the pieces for me. I would love for Christians to be known for leading with love of neighbor. And I don't know, I certainly don't think that we are. Certainly not on a whole. And again, always trying to think of me in my particular context. I don't know that the whole world will ever know our particular little church as leading with love. But hey, if our community right around us knows that, and they see that, and that changes the hearts of a few other folks to maybe do the same thing, then I feel like we're being the church that we really want to be. So
Yeah. And I feel like that's true for lots of things. Like as a community of practice, Hope Covenant Church might embody what that looks like right here in Everett, but the church 3 miles that way that also has the name Covenant on it may not, and they can look very different. But as a society, what we've done is we've said, this is what the church does because of this example of it. And it usually centers around the latest news story, I just had a conversation with a couple of guys today about what that looks like politically. And on a political scale, what we do is we say, this leader who happens to wear a Republican banner speaks for every person that wears a Republican banner across the western side of the state. And we know that that's not true, but that's what this hive mentality has created. And the same is true of the church. That this is what the church looks like because of this instance or this instance or whatever. And unfortunately, the church is on the news a lot less for the good things that it's done and a lot more for the stuff that we've messed up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sadly true.
Yeah.
Good conversation. Good
Yeah.
conversation. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up? Anything we didn't touch on here enough?
Who's your neighbor?
Who's your neighbor? Man, such a good question. Honestly, so profound. I think my neighbor is anyone whom I can serve. I think that's how I would answer that. There are people I can't serve for a variety of different reasons. But if there's someone that I can serve, then they're my neighbor. I think that's how I would answer that. How about you?
I think anyone I meet.
Mm.
I mean, that gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
But
For an introvert like you too, goodness.
yeah, but whether I serve them or not, I think it's if I can know someone a little bit more than just surface, and they want to know me a little bit more than surface. That's being a neighbor. Whether I do anything for them.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I think there's a roundedness to it for that too, where I think everybody that I would come into contact with, whether I live near them, whether I work near them, whether I'm just driving across the street with them, whatever, I think everybody happens to be a neighbor at one point or another. How we serve people, I think, comes from a place of practice. And that there's a lot behind that, and we don't have time for any of that right now. But I would say it's very similar to what you would say, right? Like you can be my neighbor and not be served by me, either because I can't serve you or because you've refused to be served by me. It doesn't make you less my neighbor. It just means that there's an intentional fence there that has to be up for boundary sake or otherwise. So, but yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Well, thank you to everyone who listened. I really want to thank my two guests here today. Thank you very much, Ryan. Excellent to see you. I can't wait until we can share some barbecue again.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Keith, thank you so much for coming back and joining us. Really appreciate that as well. And for all of you, I hope this discussion was interesting, engaging. I hope you might share it with your neighbor, whoever you see that person to be. And I would leave you with the particular challenge to ask that question of yourself. With this conversation, again, Jesus follower, a lifelong Christian, not at all. It's absolutely true. Who is your neighbor and how can you love your neighbor? Isn't this world going to be a better place if we all ask ourselves that question? So thanks for watching very much. We'll see you back next time.